You ever walk into your own house and feel like you've stepped into a nightmare that was already waiting for you? That's exactly how it felt the moment I walked through the front doors of my mansion that afternoon. The doors shut behind me with a heavy echo, the kind that lingers too long in a place built for silence. My shoes clicked against the marble floors, the sound bouncing off walls decorated with art I barely remembered buying. Everything looked perfect, too perfect, and somehow that made my chest tighten. Then I heard my wife's voice. It was sharp, furious, shaking with something darker than anger. And underneath it, there was another sound, a low, steady hiss. Steam. I stopped walking. That sound was coming from the living room. I moved faster, my pulse climbing with every step. By the time I turned the corner, my heart was already pounding. Like it knew what I was about to see before my eyes did. Vivian was standing in the middle of the living room. My wife, immaculate as always. Perfect hair, perfect posture. Her jaw clenched so tight it looked painful. In her hand, she held a hot pressing iron, steam pouring out of it like a warning. The cord stretched across the marble floor, plugged in, alive. And on the floor, pressed against the sofa, was Amara. Our new Maid. A kid. Really, she was curled up, knees pulled to her chest, arms wrapped around them like armor that wasn't strong enough. Her hands were shaking so badly her knuckles had turned white. Tears streamed down her face, soaking into her uniform. She looked terrified, not embarrassed, not guilty, terrified. The rest of the staff stood frozen around the room. No one moved. No one spoke. It felt like time had stopped, holding its breath. Vivian took a step closer to Amara. The iron hissed louder. "Vivian," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. "Put that down. Now." She didn't even look at me. "She stole from me," Vivian said, her voice tight and trembling. "She stole my jewelry." Amara shook her head violently, her voice breaking. "I didn't. I swear I didn't. Please, ma'am. I didn't steal anything." Vivian laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was cold. "Oh, please," she said, lifting her hand. A gold necklace dangled from her fingers, catching the light. "You expect me to believe that?" My eyes locked onto the pendant immediately. It was delicate, old, a thin chain with a single engraved letter. A W. Vivian held it up like proof. "That's the Whitmore family crest. You think you can walk around wearing it like you belong to us?" Amara was sobbing now. "It's mine. I've had it my whole life. They told me my mother left it with me when I was found." Vivian stepped closer. Too close. The iron tilted slightly. Something inside me snapped and I rushed forward and grabbed Vivian's wrist. For one terrifying second, the iron hovered inches away from Amara before I yanked it back with all my strength. "Have you lost your mind?" I shouted. Vivian tried to pull free. "She's lying. Ask her where she got it before you defend her like this." I ripped the cord out of the wall. The iron died with a sharp sizzle as it hit the marble floor, leaving a black scorch mark behind. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Silence. Amara collapsed inward, shaking uncontrollably. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her it was over, but my body wouldn't move. I turned to Vivian. "You could have seriously hurt her. She was wearing our crest." Vivian shot back. What was I supposed to think? I bent down and picked up the pendant. The moment it touched my palm, my breath caught. The gold felt familiar, warm, wrong in a way I couldn't explain. I turned it over slowly. The engraving was perfect, too perfect. My hands started to shake. I looked at Amara. "Where did you get this?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I don't know. I've always had it. Came with me from the orphanage." The room felt like it was closing in. 25 years vanished in an instant. Because I had seen this necklace before. That pendant belonged to my little sister, Leah Whitmore. The sister we buried after the house fire. Vivian scoffed nervously. "You can't seriously believe this." I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was staring at Amara. Her eyes, the shape of her face, the way her chin trembled when she cried. Details I had never noticed before, but suddenly couldn't unsee. "Where did you find her?" I asked quietly. Who hired her? Vivian hesitated. Just for a second. An agency. Why does it matter? My voice dropped. Because that necklace was buried with my sister. No one spoke. The staff stared. Amara looked up, confused and frightened. Vivian's face drained of color. That's impossible, Vivian said. They found remains. Ashes. I snapped. Nothing identifiable. Amara shook her head. Sir, I don't understand what's happening. I didn't steal anything. I took a deep breath. We're going to find out. Vivian laughed, but there was panic in it. You're calling a lawyer over a maid? I pulled out my phone. I'm calling my lawyer because the truth matters. I made the call. Greg, I need a court-authorized DNA test. Immediately, Vivian lunged toward me. Daniel, stop this. I held up my hand. Enough. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, low and distant. Like a warning, I knelt beside Amara and spoke softly. If there's even a 1% chance you're my sister, I can't ignore it. She looked at me through tears. Fear was still there, but so was something else. Hope. Vivian saw it too. And for the first time, my wife looked afraid, because whatever the truth was, I knew one thing for certain. Everything in my life was about to change. The house didn't return to normal after that. There was no going back to polite silence. No pretending the walls hadn't just heard something they could never forget. The living room stayed frozen long after the iron had gone cold, like the mansion itself was holding on to the moment, refusing to let it pass. Vivian was the first to move. She turned away sharply, smoothing her hair as if control could be pressed back into place the same way she pressed silk dresses before charity galas. This is ridiculous, she said, her voice forced into something almost casual. You're letting guilt and old trauma cloud your judgment. I didn't answer her. My eyes were still on Amara. She sat where she'd collapsed, knees hugged close, staring at the pendant now resting in my hand like it might disappear if she blinked. She looked smaller than ever, swallowed by the size of the room and the weight of what had just been said. Collins? I said quietly. The butler straightened instantly. Yes, sir. No one leaves this house, I said. Not until I say so. Vivian spun around. You can't be serious. I am, I replied. And you're not touching her again. Something flickered across Vivian's face. Anger, yes, but underneath it something else. Fear. The kind that comes when a carefully built version of reality starts to crack. I helped Amara to her feet. She flinched at first, then hesitated before taking my hand. Her grip was light, uncertain, like she expected to be pushed away. Come with me, I said gently. You need to sit somewhere quiet. She nodded, still shaking as we walked past the staff. I felt their eyes on us. Confused, uneasy, whispering questions they wouldn't dare ask out loud. By the time we reached the sitting room near my study, the storm outside had grown louder. Thunder rolled overhead. Rattling the tall windows, I offered Amara a seat and a glass of water. She held it with both hands, but didn't drink. I'm sorry, she whispered suddenly. I didn't mean to cause trouble. The words hit me harder than anything else that day. You didn't cause this, I said. None of it is your fault. She looked up at me, eyes red and tired. Then why does it feel like everything is my fault? I didn't have an answer. Because the truth was, her presence had stirred something that had been buried for decades. Something I'd worked my entire adult life to keep under control. I left her with Collins and stepped into my study, closing the door behind me. The moment I was alone, the weight hit all at once. I braced myself against the desk, staring at the old family photograph framed on the wall. My parents.me. And Leia, 6 years old, smiling, wearing that same gold pendant. I hadn't realized I was shaking until the phone buzzed in my hand. Greg, my lawyer? I'll handle it, he said after I explained. But Daniel, you need to prepare yourself. This won't be quiet. I don't care, I said. I just need the truth. When I stepped back into the hall, Vivian was waiting. She blocked my path, arms crossed, her smile tight and rehearsed. You're humiliating me, she said, in front of the staff, over some orphan story. I stared at her. Careful, I said. That's my sister you're talking about. Or at least she might be. Vivian laughed, but it came out wrong. You're projecting. That fire destroyed everything. We moved on. No, I said coldly. I moved on. You benefited. Her eyes flashed. So this is what this is about? Guilt? You feel sorry for her. So suddenly she's family? She was nearly hurt today, I snapped. And you did that. Silence stretched between us. Finally, Vivian turned away. This is a mistake, she said. And when it blows up, don't expect me to stand there smiling. That night, no one slept. Amara stayed in the guest room down the hall from my study. I checked on her twice, quietly, not wanting to frighten her. Each time, she was awake, staring at the ceiling. I don't remember my parents, she told me softly when I asked. I don't remember the fire. I don't remember anything before the orphanage. Just this. She touched the pendant at her neck. I nodded. Sometimes the mind hides things to survive. Outside, the storm finally broke. Rain lashed against the windows, relentless, like the past demanding to be let back in. The next 3 days crawled by. Vivian avoided me completely. When she did speak, it was clipped, dismissive, as if pretending none of this mattered might make it true. The staff whispered. Amara stayed quiet, polite, withdrawn. But I noticed how her eyes followed me when she thought I wasn't looking. On the 4th morning, the envelope arrived. Thick, official, final. Vivian was already in the room when Greg arrived. She paced like a caged animal, muttering about lawsuits and reputation, about how this would look in the press. Greg opened the folder. Time slowed as he cleared his throat. Biological match confirmed, he said. The words didn't land all at once. They sank deep. Amara gasped, covering her mouth as tears spilled over. That means? I sank into the chair behind me, my legs suddenly useless. It means you're my sister. Vivian shook her head violently. No, this isn't real. The fire? There were no remains, I said. Just like I told you. Amara looked at me through tears. I have a brother? I stood and crossed the room in 2 steps, pulling her into a careful, shaking embrace. Yes, I whispered. You do. Behind us, something shattered. Vivian had dropped a glass, the sound sharp against the floor. When I turned, her face was pale, her expression unraveling. This isn't over, she said, her voice trembling. She'll take everything from you. I met her gaze, steady and calm. She already gave me back everything I lost. And that was the moment I knew. The fire that destroyed my family all those years ago hadn't finished burning. It had just been waiting. The truth doesn't stay quiet for long in a house like ours, where reputations are polished and secrets are buried deep. Truth doesn't knock politely. It crashes through the front door and brings cameras with it. The morning after the DNA results, the mansion felt different. Not haunted anymore. Exposed. Like every wall was listening, every mirror reflecting something none of us could ignore. Amara barely spoke. She sat at the breakfast table untouched by the spread laid out in front of her, fingers wrapped around a mug she never lifted. Every few minutes, she'd glance up at me like she was checking to see if I was still there. Like she was afraid I'd disappear the way everyone else in her life had. You don't have to stay here, I told her gently. Not if it's too much. She shook her head. I've spent my whole life not belonging anywhere. I don't want to run again. Those words settled heavy in my chest. Vivian, on the other hand, moved through the house like a storm trapped in human form. She slammed doors, made calls behind closed walls, gave orders to staff who suddenly avoided her eyes. When she finally confronted me, it wasn't with tears or apologies. It was with accusation. You're choosing her, she said, standing in my study, arms crossed tight against her chest. Over your wife. I'm choosing the truth, I replied. She laughed bitterly. No, you're choosing redemption. You think this fixes what happened back then. I stood. Nothing fixes losing a sister, but trying to hurt her again? That's unforgivable. Her face twisted. You cared about her more than me. I saw it. The way you looked at her. She's my blood, I said. And you tried to harm her. That was the moment Vivian realized she had lost point 2 days later. The story broke. Someone leaked it. Whether through the agency, the courts, or Vivian herself, I'll never know. But by noon, every major outlet had it. Whitmore heiress found after 24 years. Maid revealed as lost sister in shocking DNA twist. Atlanta socialite accused in household abuse scandal. The gates were swarmed with reporters. Cameras flashed nonstop. Amara froze when she saw them through the windows, panic flashing across her face. They're here because of me? She whispered. They're here because the truth scares people, I said. And because some truths are too big to hide. The police arrived that evening. Not quietly. Vivian didn't scream when they read her rights. She didn't fight. She stood perfectly still, chin high, mascara streaked just enough to remind everyone watching that control was slipping as they led her past the cameras. She turned to me one last time. She'll take everything from you, she said, her voice low and sharp that I met her eyes. She already gave me back everything I lost. Amara stood beside me, shaking, as the door closed behind Vivian for the last time. The trial came fast. Faster than anyone expected. The prosecution didn't focus on jealousy or marital problems. They focused on what mattered, the evidence. Testimony from staff. The scorched marble floor. The iron. The photographs of Amara's damaged uniform. The pattern of behavior that had finally been dragged into the light. Amara testified. Her voice shook at first, but she didn't break. She told them about the accusations, the humiliation, the fear, about being called a thief when all she had ever tried to do was survive. That I watched from the gallery. Fists clenched, heart pounding with every word. Vivian's lawyers tried to spin it. Emotional distress, stress, misunderstandings. The jury didn't buy it. When the verdict came back, the room was silent. Guilty. Vivian collapsed into her chair, the image of perfection finally.
Forward. He gently placed his hand over the cup. No, he said. Julia, you don't need to serve someone who treats you as less than human. He turned to Frank. I've watched you insult her for weeks. This stops now. Frank stood abruptly, bristling. Who do you think you are? Just some blue-collar nobody. Maybe, David said calmly. But I know the difference between a man and a bully. He placed $100 bill on the table. Your meals are covered for the next month. But if you can't treat the staff with respect, you'll need to find somewhere else to eat. Frank muttered angrily and stormed out. Julia stood frozen, tears of relief welling in her eyes. No one had ever defended her like that. You didn't have to do that, she whispered. You've been enduring it for weeks, David replied softly. Just because you can survive something doesn't mean you should have to. He invited her to sit with him, and she reluctantly agreed. When he explained that he was considering buying Tony's diner, Julia's heart sank. Another corporate buyer could mean losing her job again. But David quickly stopped her fears. Julia, you're the reason I want to buy this place. I've watched how you treat people.
When the noise finally died down, what surprised me most wasn't the silence, it was the calm. After weeks of flashing cameras, shouting reporters, courtrooms filled with strangers dissecting our lives, the mansion settled into something softer, quieter, not empty but no longer tense. Like a house that had been holding its breath for decades and was finally allowed to exhale. Amara stayed. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because for the first time in her life, she wanted to stay somewhere. We walked the grounds together one evening as the sun dipped low, turning the marble and glass golden. She moved slowly, like she was memorizing everything, afraid it might vanish if she didn't. I don't know who I'm supposed to be now, she admitted. I was always just surviving. I nodded. Survival teaches you strength. Living teaches you purpose. You'll get there. She smiled faintly. You sound like you've practiced that speech. I laughed. Actually laughed. For the first time in years, there was no guilt attached to it. The trial had ended. Vivian was gone. Her name became a cautionary headline, then a footnote, then a memory people argued about online. I didn't follow the debates. I didn't need to. Justice had been served, not out of revenge, but out of protection. And that mattered. Point one morning, Amara knocked on my study door holding the pendant. I want to do something, she said. But I don't know if it's stupid. I looked at the gold chain resting in her palm, polished now, catching the light. Tell me. I want to take it to the cemetery, she said. To our parents. I want them to know. I found you. We went that afternoon. The Whitmore family cemetery sat just beyond the tree line behind the mansion, quiet and rarely visited. Sunlight filtered through the leaves as we stood before the gravestones. No cameras. No staff. Just us. Amara knelt and placed the pendant gently between the stones. Mother, she whispered. Father, I didn't know your faces, but I know your love brought me back here. I rested a hand on her shoulder. And I won't let that love be lost again. We stood there in silence for a long time. No speeches, no tears, just peace. Weeks later, at a press conference packed with donors, board members, and journalists, I made an announcement that sent a ripple through the room that I named Amara co-chair of the Whitmore Foundation. Not as a symbol, not as a publicity move, but because she understood something many of us had forgotten, that charity isn't about names on buildings. It's about people who were overlooked, silenced, or discarded. She spoke briefly that day. Her voice was steady. I spent my life believing I was alone, she said. Now I know family isn't just about blood. It's about who stands between you and the fire. The applause wasn't polite. It was real. That night, we walked back through the mansion halls together. The same halls that once echoed with fear now felt warm, alive. So, she asked, smiling, what happens now? I looked around. At the home, at the past we'd faced, at the future we hadn't planned but were ready to meet. Now, I said, we live, we rebuild, and we make sure the Whitmore name means something good. She laughed softly. Maybe that fire wasn't just destruction. No, I agreed. Maybe it was a clearing. As the doors closed behind us and the lights dimmed, I thought about the question that started it all. What would you do if you walked in and had to choose who to protect? Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it looks like a sister found, a truth faced, and a future finally free from the shadows of the past. And sometimes redemption doesn't come from what you lose, but from what you finally get back.